Welcome to the Inkwell, where we dip into our pool of knowledge and experience to share insights and best practices on the big topics that are affecting HR professionals. I'm Emily Miller, and I'm the Director of Marketing at Purple Ink. And I'm here today talking to some members of the Purple Ink team about employee well-being. Well-being is having a moment in the spotlight, and for good reason. When people feel supported, businesses flourish. And today we're going to unpack what well-being in the workplace really looks like. To get us started, why don't you two introduce yourselves to our viewers?
Hi, I'm Jody Curtis, and I'm the founder of Purple Ink.
And I am Courtney McAuliffe. I am VP of Consulting Services for Purple Ink.
So, Jody, what would you tell leaders who think that well-being is fluffy and helps employees but not the business?
If well being were fluffy, then burnout wouldn't be so expensive. So it's a real thing. It impacts the numbers, it impacts profits. People can be exhausted or overwhelmed, and their performance can suffer because of it. It it shows up in things like turnover, mistakes, disengagement, and just generally missed opportunities for both individuals and the business itself. So it's really about helping people to bring their best energy and to focus on their work consistently. And I don't think that's fluffy. I think that's smart business.
Courtney, what well-being challenges are you seeing most often with organizations right now?
Yeah, to piggyback off what Jody had said, burnout is a really real situation in our organizations. SHRM reported that in 2024, 44% of our workers were feeling burnout. And so
Yeah.
that starts to translate into how they are engaged or not engaged at work. They start to disconnect, they start to have strain and pull within the organization. And I think what organizations are seeing is that well-being and wellness is not a one size fits all for every person or every organization. So it's not only doing a walking challenge or a water challenge to make sure that folks are physically well, but it's also making sure that we are connecting on all layers of well-being, so that it really supports kind of the full person that is our worker. And so for one person, having mental health support may be that well-being support that's needed. For somebody else, it might be something like schedule flexibility or a different type of workload. For a third person, it might be just having knowledge on financial stability and understanding how can they retire when they turn 65 and what are the steps that they need to do to be better equipped for that. And so organizations really looking at kind of the full person will help solve some of those challenges that we're seeing.
And with all these differing wellness needs, it can be tough to figure out the right things to do and if they're working. So,
Mhm.
Jody, how do you evaluate whether an organization's current well-being efforts are effective?
I think organizations have to think about what is working and what is helping people and what they might say they do, right? So maybe they say they pay for gym memberships, but nobody's actually going to the gym, right? Do the employees know about the resources or the options that they have? Are they using them? Do the leaders of the organization, are they modeling those behaviors? Or again, is that just something that they say they're committed to? But if people are still feeling overloaded and unheard and are burnt out, they probably aren't landing. It has to be something that really is integrated in and day out, and not just a program that runs for 2 months or 6 weeks. So,
And Jody, on that same point, I would be curious, how many organizations know what well-being means to their
um,
team? Are they
yeah,
building a program for things that matched, in the early 2000s, or are they building a program for things of today's workforce?
right.
And that may shift annually, based on the changes that folks are facing.
Totally agree. Yeah, good thought.
And as we try to figure out what our individual workforces need in this wellness space, it can be helpful to have a starting point, things that commonly work for a lot of employees. So, Courtney, what types of well-being programs have you seen create the biggest impact?
I think well-being programs that create the biggest impact are ones that are really multi-layered. It's not just a one perk or only the gym membership. I think that's a great perk and a great addition to many workforces, but that isn't for everyone. And so making sure that there's different layers in there can help make sure that companies are getting a huge impact on that investment. Well-being programs are not always inexpensive to do as a whole, and so balancing maybe the free options with some of the options that would have a cost associated, making sure that there are things like learning and development opportunities that helps on a well-being level, flexible work practices or schedules, accessibility to mental well-being support, meaningful time off. And so making sure that there's time off, but there's an encouragement to use it. And when you are
Mhm.
using it, you are off and you really are able to reset and unwind. And Jody had mentioned this earlier, really understanding the workload and what is straining or pulling at our team members is helpful in understanding what type of program should it be. And even Emily, to your point, where it should start, because it just has to start and then it can grow from there.
And Courtney, what's the best way to integrate well-being into existing HR initiatives like onboarding or performance conversations?
Yeah, that's a fair question because, like Jody mentioned, these can be time consuming and can be a little bit expensive. So, my first advice is to build on what you already have, what already exists in your organization. So, have it be part of your onboarding process in a way that you're highlighting well-being next to highlighting what benefits exist, making sure that you're giving them information on how and when to use the different components of the program, and really building it as a part of your culture. And so is flexibility part of your company culture? Then it's an extension of your well-being program and an extension of your culture. They're not fighting against each other. But I
Mm.
think asking yourself questions around what are your goals? What are you achieving? What's sustainable? And what support do the leaders need in order to execute that program? But then also, what support do team members need in feeling well and feeling as though they are supported? There's a lot of ways that you can bring in that feed forward language to really normalize conversations around workloads, energy, support that's needed without turning it into, a little bit of a therapy session, right? We're not clinicians. Some of our listeners may be, but I'm not. And
Yeah.
so, really talking about what we need and how we are able to provide what they need as an organization. If we can't provide it, the answer doesn't have to be no, but the answer can be, that won't work. Here's what will, or here's what we
Mm.
have. Here's something we've seen, so that it's not just saying, thanks for highlighting the support you need. No, we can't offer support there, but thanks for adding the support you need. Here's what we can do to support you.
Love that. Love that.
We've mentioned this a couple times, burnout. It's a
Yeah.
major well-being challenge right now, and the earlier you can catch it, the better. So, Courtney, how can leaders be
Yeah.
trained to spot early signs of burnout or disengagement?
Yeah, I think first is just making sure that managers feel comfortable looking for changes, looking for warning signs. Again, we're not necessarily diagnosing what's causing the burnout. It may be work related, it may be personally related. We know that both of those impact the workforce. And so, leaders looking for patterns, somebody that was highly motivated, suddenly a little bit more withdrawn in meetings, somebody that was really extroverted and had high levels of energy is now maybe missing deadlines or having limited follow through. Maybe making sure that they're aware it's okay to notice those things. Noticing those things mean that you're getting to know your team members. It may be a quick fix or it may be a more long term impact, but helping your managers see ways that they can connect to team members. They may need a little bit of a script to do that at first because it may not be comfortable to ask somebody, how are you doing? Or I've noticed you have become a little bit more withdrawn. Is everything okay with you? and making sure that those questions are really tied to the individual, not necessarily tied to the work, more making sure that they are just okay. There's trainings out there that could come into organizations, trainings like mental health first aid, well-being trainings that can help folks understand warning signs, understand what they're looking for, and building a comfort around those conversations. We're not always used to asking folks if they're okay. And to Jody's earlier point, we're definitely not always used to listening to the answer and then responding to that answer. And so it's making sure you're not only asking, but you're listening and you're providing that support.
And we've talked a little bit already about making sure that your well-being initiatives are actually effective and not just checking a box. And of course, we always love to be able to back up our decisions with data. So, Courtney, what metrics should organizations track to understand well-being?
Yeah, and for metrics to understand well-being, it's definitely not only one metric. So you want to be able to have a complete story of what's happening in your workforce. And so looking at things like turnover, particularly voluntary turnover, looking at things like maybe unscheduled absences, absenteeism. We encourage organizations to do regular engagement surveys. And so seeing what themes are coming out from those surveys year over year can be good burnout indicators or stress indicators. A lot of organizations may have an employee assistance program or an EAP. While it's confidential what employees are using, organizations might be able to get a report of how many are utilizing services. And so if you're seeing an uptick there, it may be the sign of something else. Also, utilizing something that we like to call engagement interviews, or you may know them as stay interviews. So, not waiting
Mhm.
until the exit interview to understand what's going on with somebody,
Right.
but having regular face to face, in person, or virtual conversations with team members on how things are going. How is it not going? What's their biggest stressor of the day? What do they love about their role? What would they change, if anything? Things like that to really understand kind of what's going on in their world. WHO estimates that 12 billion workdays are lost annually to folks that have high levels of anxiety. Gallup is citing high absenteeism leads to individuals that maybe have mental well-being stressors. And so, while that is a good indicator when folks are having some well-being situations or struggles, it is not the only indicator. And so, we want to make sure we're looking at the full picture.
We've talked about this a little bit, but well-being initiatives, we don't want them to be kind of their own campaign that's over here and separate from everything else, but we want them to be integrated into the everyday. That's how they work best. So, Jody, how can companies embed well-being into day-to-day interactions and not just programs?
Yeah. Even it really is about those everyday choices. And sometimes it's as simple as thinking about how meetings are getting scheduled. Are you scheduling meetings over lunch when people might need a break? Or are you scheduling meetings earlier in the morning, which can cause stress for people who maybe have to get kids on the school bus? I worked for an organization for a while where I had the bright idea that we should have a leadership meeting once a week. And so the CEO said, "That's a great idea. We're going to have them on Fridays at 5 o'clock." And I'm no joke. We had Fridays meetings at 5 o'clock and talk about stress, right? People were mad, they were upset. Their spouses were, anxious for them to get home on a Friday night. So, just thinking about some of those and how that helps or hurt people. And then again, how are leaders responding when someone says that they've been struggling? Are they open? Are they vulnerable to those conversations? So, less about the programs or the initiatives, but more about showing empathy, flexibility, and respect for people's time and capacity. Another thing could be priorities, right? How many times have you maybe had a boss say, I need this by tomorrow at noon, and you work extra hard to get it done by noon and then find out your boss is out of the office for the rest of the day, right? So thinking about priorities and deadlines and are they real or not real?
Thank you both for joining me and sharing your insights. And thank you, viewers, for joining us to talk about well being today. If you have any questions or are in need of training around well being, help understanding your employees' needs, assistance creating a plan to support your employees' well being, please reach out to us at Purple Ink. We would love to help.